Today, ladies and gentlemen, I'm going to help you decide whether Hearts of Iron 4 is the right World War II strategy game for you. By the end of this video, you will know what it's like to actually play this game to help you make an informed decision. I'm not a Hearts of Iron fanboy, just a strategy fan who took a chance on this game, so I could report back with my findings to you, my fellow generals. First, give me 90 seconds to describe the game in a nutshell. If you're still intrigued after that, we'll go into more detail about how the game plays, the mechanics and how it compares to other games you may have played. If you took Company of Heroes and zoomed out by several miles, then inserted enough mechanics to make a grown man cry, you'd have Hearts of Iron 4. But seriously, you can assume the role of any nation on Earth and steer them through the Second World War from a global perspective. You can start in 1936 to give yourself a few years to set up for the war in your own way, or jump straight into the action in 1939. The AI can have a historic focus, so everyone around you behaves as those countries did in World War II, or you can turn that off and watch the madness unfold. The game can be paused, sped up or slowed down, thank God, because once you jump in, there are an overwhelming number of things that require your attention. Your main aim is to design and build up an army at division level, then go cause some trouble or save the day, depending on how you're feeling at the time. But creating this army is a gloriously detailed process involving research, production lines and supply lines to ensure your divisions have the right weapons at the right time. Diplomacy, espionage, and trade have a strong presence in the game, but the real joy lies in the meticulous creation of battle plans to attack or defend against your neighbours, and trying to ensure you are producing enough of the right equipment and supplying it to your frontline troops to ensure they fight as effectively as possible. Before diving into the detailed mechanics, a bit of history for you. The game was first released in June 2016 and has remained insanely popular since, largely due to the release of several paid-for DLCs and free updates with even more content on the horizon. The game has approximately 10 billion very positive reviews on Steam, and although it looks underwhelming from the screenshots and videos, the true beauty of this game lies beneath the skin. Hearts of Iron 4 was created by Paradox, who are based in Sweden and are kind of a big deal in the grand strategy genre. Although their relationship with the gaming community is not always cordial, there's no denying their pedigree in this genre, as they have created some of the best strategy games on the planet. Before analysing what you actually do in the game, let's pretend you've just purchased Hearts of Iron 4 and fired it up. Let's see what the game looks like when you first log in. You may have to wait a while for the game to load, as it has a lot of number crunching to do in the background, but as you can see we have a slick menu with some pretty artwork, standard single player and multiplayer options, along with the usual controls for video and audio. As long as you can be patient with loading times and are willing to reduce or remove certain settings, this game has the potential to be enjoyed on a lower end system. With first impressions out of the way, you'll want to get stuck into your first game and look for the tutorial. The tutorial is a bit like being kicked into the pool on your first swimming lesson, and while the instructor demonstrates how you should be paddling, you're a bit too busy drowning to listen. Whichever way you cut it, there's a lot to learn with Hearts of Iron 4. Your first playthrough will be overwhelming. Each time you finish a session, you'll have learnt a little something new, leaving you with plenty of questions to Google while you're on the toilet before your next session. This process will repeat itself until the end of time, as there are simply that many things to learn about the game. It does take commitment to reach even a reasonable standard of play, but the tutorial does just enough to make sure you have fun in your first session, giving you the enthusiasm you need to find the rest of the answers for yourself after having a bit of a cry. So what do you actually do in a game of Hearts of Iron 4? Let's take a detailed look at the most common mechanics and at least a cursory overview of the others to help you decide if this game is right for you. Firstly, some of the big picture items. Choosing your country at the beginning of a game has a huge impact on your experience. The major powers of World War II will have more technology and bigger armies, but you can play as any country in the world. If you play as Poland with historically accurate AI, you know that Germany will invade you in 1939, making it a more difficult choice for a more experienced player. But if you want a quieter game, you could play as Brazil and pick fights on your own terms. Civilian and military factories are also a key part of higher level gameplay. The first thing you do in a game is instruct your existing civilian factories to create more civilian factories. Think of them as villagers from an RTS game, because civilian factories are the key to ramping up your economy in the early game. As you'll see later, they can even act like a resource by trading their use for things you need, and a certain number are required to keep your population happy. They are used to build everything other than military equipment, which is where the military factories come in. You'll start with a certain number already, then instruct your civilian factories to build more military factories, ramping up your ability to churn out more equipment and more types of equipment at the same time. Basically, most things in the game come down to how many civilian and military factories you have. They are that important. Let us continue to gently peel the onion and get into the detail of the mechanics. I want to start with the process you will find yourself performing a lot in the Hearts of Iron: researching new equipment, producing that equipment, then ensuring it reaches the relevant divisions. This is a huge and never-ending part of the game. The tech tree is big and behaves much like you would expect. There's a time penalty if you attempt to research something that shouldn't appear until later in the war, so you're unlikely to ever see a Tiger tank in 1937, for example. Once it's researched, you'll need to actually produce this new piece of equipment, which is where the military factories come in. You create a production line and decide how many military factories to allocate to the production of that equipment, which is a constant juggling act as you never have enough military factories. The efficiency of production is low at first, but it increases slowly over time and can be increased further by research to ensure each factory churns out as much as possible. So now your new equipment is rolling off the production line at an ever-increasing pace. How do you get it to the divisions that need it? The supply system in Hearts of Iron 4 is a little world unto its own. The game knows what equipment and how much of it each division needs to operate at 100%. Although supply is made up of a plethora of different equipment, everything is bundled into one supply river that flows out from your capital until it reaches the divisions that need it, using railways, supply hubs, and trucks. You'll need to upgrade your railways to expand their supply capacity and keep an eye on your supply levels as you push into enemy territory. This system of research, manufacture, and supply is absolutely key in Hearts of Iron, but it runs even deeper than this. How does the game know which divisions require your new tank? And what happens if you make too many? Any new equipment will be stored in a warehouse until it's included on a division template. Each division you start with and create is based on a division template, which denotes exactly what that division is made up of. Change the template, and the game will automatically take the equipment from storage and deliver it to the relevant divisions as best it can via the supply system. If you don't have enough equipment, the game equips the divisions as far as possible and shows you how much of a deficit you're in. You'll be in deficit a lot. You'll spend much of your time tweaking your division templates, and you can have a lot of fun doing it. Each division has so many statistics, and they all have an impact on how that division will perform in various settings such as mountains or rivers, attacking or defending. Some effects are obvious. Anti-tank guns will make that division more effective against tanks. But each time you add a battalion, you increase the size of that division, which brings us to one key concept: combat width. Each province you fight in has a combat width, which determines how many divisions can fight in that province at any given time. You need to design your divisions so they fit into the provinces as efficiently as possible. 2 smaller divisions taking up 100% of the combat width is better than one big one taking up 80%. Your army is a complex beast to manage, but your air force is comparatively straightforward. You research and build aircraft in the way we've just described, then you allocate aircraft to an airfield. From there you can assign them to their respective missions such as air superiority or tactical bombing, provided that region is within range of that particular type of aircraft. Finally, we have your navy. Shipyards build all types of ships which you send into an area of sea. If they come across an enemy fleet, they'll throw numbers at each other until one comes out on top. Controlling an area of sea can protect trade routes, set the scene for a naval invasion, and other such important military matters. Although we're operating at a divisional level, you can micromanage divisions a surprising amount. It's incredibly valuable to encircle enemy divisions, as cutting them off from their supplies gives you a huge advantage. Divisions can be grouped into an army, which is headed by a general, then multiple armies can be assigned into a group headed by a field marshal. These generals and field marshals are based on real people and have their own traits which affect your divisions and armies, such as being a panzer specialist. Plus, they change over time, giving you even more control over their development. But a general and field marshal can only handle so many divisions or armies before they begin to receive a penalty, so you're forced to spread your divisions over multiple generals. Construction is a huge part of the game. You build factories, you upgrade infrastructure, air bases, anti-air, fuel silos, but you don't get to build a detailed, singular base that needs to be defended like you would in an RTS. The construction is on a much grander scale, and visually, once constructed, it's mostly numbers on a screen, so you have to use your imagination a bit. Resources take a surprisingly back seat in this game. They do exist and are important for production, but when you don't have enough of a resource, you simply trade for it using merchant shipping. You don't have a bank of gold or anything, but there are a variety of resources available, and you can increase the amount you extract through technology or improving infrastructure. Alternatively, you could just invade somewhere and take their resources. And of course, you should be aware of trading with someone you're about to go to war with and protecting your trade routes. Fuel and manpower are reasonably straightforward resources to understand. Fuel comes from refining oil and is stockpiled for use at a later date. There are technologies to increase your oil production, and it's consumed particularly when ships, planes and tanks are in action. If you run out of fuel, your war machine will come to a grinding halt. Manpower is used to create new divisions. The amount changes drastically between different nations, but can be influenced by political decisions such as changing conscription laws. Ultimately, some nations simply have more of it, and you'd be wise to use that to your advantage. In a moment, I'll describe the various game modes this game has to offer, but there are a few more mechanics to examine before we look at other factors such as DLCs, prices, and everybody's favourite subject, the AI. So take another sip of coffee, and let's do this. External politics is a bit of a take-it-or-leave-it section of the game. Declaring war is obviously important, and you can spend some time forming factions with other nations, or you can just kind of not. Internal politics has a bit more meat on the bones as you spend political influence to appoint advisors who provide a variety of bonuses, and with relative ease you can turn a democratic country into a fascist regime, or vice versa. Then there are other political decisions such as exporting and conscription, which can have a big impact on various sections of the game. If you purchase the La Resistance DLC, you have the ability to set up an intelligence agency by giving up some civilian factories. Yep, it's those civilian factories again. You can increase your knowledge of other nations and make it more difficult for them to gather knowledge on you. As we know, knowledge is power. You can send agents on missions and decrypt other nations' codes to unlock certain bonuses against them. It's a straightforward part of the game, but adds a nice level of complexity along with some roleplay. Battle plans, however, are a major part of the game and are, for some, the main attraction. You can spend hours stationing your troops in specific locations and allocating them to a particular front line, which might make your neighbour a bit nervous. Once your armies are ready, nothing will actually happen until you activate the battle plan. So you can draw and redraw battle lines to your heart's content while crafting these beautiful battle plans. Then spend a moment hovering your finger over the button to activate the plan, then see what happens. The battle plan is in many ways the culmination of all your hard work, assigning your divisions to capture key points and force your enemy to capitulate. It can be a true joy or the source of much swearing or squeaky bum times. Finally, we have national focus trees, which have an immense impact on the direction of your game. In many ways, they act like research. You have a tree to follow, but the scope of what can be achieved is huge. You can affect almost any part of the game from your focus tree, from unlocking a new research slot to annexing another nation. Just picture yourself as the leader of a country, and the focus tree is a set of decisions that you can make. It could be an industrial project, it could be political, or anything we've previously discussed. Much of the focus tree for a major nation is story-focused. It guides you through the decisions and actual happenings during World War II, as well as providing some interesting alternative history options to spice up the gameplay. Want to reject Hitler and turn Germany into the democratic sweetheart of Europe? Want to invade Africa as Japan? Hearts of Iron has got you covered. But only the major factions have bespoke national focus trees, whereas most other nations have a generic tree. Not everybody has something expanded and unique, but you can unlock many focus trees with paid-for DLCs, which we'll discuss shortly, and the insanely awesome mod community have got you covered here as well. The job of the AI in many ways is to follow a set path because of the historic accuracy of the game, but there are so many decisions for the AI to make, it's bound to trip up or simply do dumb things at times. As a newer player, you won't notice anything particularly bad, as the game has had several years to iron out the obvious creases. Increasing the difficulty basically introduces penalties to you and bonuses to the AI, but the AI won't use certain features of the game for itself, and you'll learn how to exploit it in certain situations. Does this ruin the game? No. Is it something Paradox need to constantly work on? Yes. Moving on. The sound effects are great at immersing you into the 1930s and 1940s. It may not be easy to tell from watching somebody else play the game, but it's the little details such as the pen scratching on paper sound when signing off executive orders that really brings you into this era. It's fair to say Paradox excel at immersion. In most of their games, whether it's the far-flung future of Stellaris or the historic times of Crusader Kings, it's a running theme throughout their games, and Hearts of Iron 4 is no exception. The music in Hearts of Iron 4 is almost perfection. The biggest compliment you can give to a game is wanting to listen to that music outside of the game. Paradox have a big budget, and that shows from this soundtrack as it oozes production value. Some of you may not give a stuff about music, but in a grand strategy game where you'll spend much of your time simply looking at the screen and strategizing, it's surprisingly important to have a decent soundtrack that knows when to take a back seat and also when to come to the foreground. Hearts of Iron 4 simply ticks all the right boxes at the right time. Being able to appreciate a game by zooming in and out has a big impact on immersion. Given the grand scale of this game, you can't zoom in very far, but you can see some models of infantry, ships, tanks and planes to give you some visual perspective. But it's not much of a looker up close. However, being able to zoom right out and see the world map forming after having spent 10 minutes focusing on one province is damn impressive. Overall, the game is aesthetically pleasing for fans of World War II. The sound effects and music are top-notch. Zooming in can often break immersion, but the sheer scale of the world map is simply awesome. By now you've got a good idea of how the game plays and the basics of the mechanics, so let's examine how the game lets you use all of this in the various game modes. Most of what I've already described is essentially how the single player works, but how much of this game is story and how much of it is numbers is actually an interesting question. The story of this game is the Second World War, but whether it plays out as history did or as an alternative history is entirely up to you. There is a lot of historic accuracy here, if that's your thing, whether it's a naval treaty, an industrial plan, alliances, or great sea battles, but there is less detail outside of the major nations, and some of it is locked behind paid-for DLC, which we'll discuss in a moment. But with all of these paths laid out in front of you, many of which creating multiple ways of playing the same nation, the game ultimately boils down to two sets of numbers being slammed together and entering a war of attrition. That is no bad thing, it's the real beauty of the game, but the point is that only so much of this game is made up of these story elements. Ultimately, the single-player sandbox has the potential to keep you absorbed for thousands of hours. Online multiplayer exists, sort of. 99.999% of players won't ever play strangers online, and there are certainly balance issues. However, for those interested in a hardcore multiplayer experience with strangers, you can do it, but you may find Hearts of Iron 4 isn't the game for you. One of the more intriguing ways of playing Hearts of Iron 4 is online co-op. You can play as the same country with somebody else. Other games have done this before, but the sheer scale and scope of this game means that it lends itself rather well to cooperative play within the same nation. There is so much to do, whether it's manning different fronts or allocating research or construction to different players. It can actually work very nicely, and it is worth considering. Hearts of Iron 4 has certainly been accused of being very samey, but it really depends on how you play the game. Playing as a major nation versus playing as a not-so-major nation can be two incredibly different experiences, but at its core, there are many things you will do the same, no matter which nation you play or how you play them. For most players, it's a great option to have in your library once you're over the initial frenzy, to play the occasional game, especially as it's updated every now and then, so you may find picking it up again in 3 months' time, there may be a few new mechanics to get your head around. So we have a big tick in the longevity box before we even consider DLCs or mods, which we will in a moment, but as with any game, moderation is key. So that's what it's like to play Hearts of Iron 4, but how much is it going to cost you? The base cost of the game is $40, £35 or €40, but you should never, ever, ever pay full price for this game, as it's regularly on sale with 75% off, bringing the price down to $10, £8.74 or €10. There's a sale almost every month, so please don't pay full price for the base game. It's also available on Xbox Game Pass if you've already signed up to that. Hearts of Iron 4 has a serious amount of DLCs which add a ton of new content and cost a serious amount of money if you were to purchase them all. Some of these DLCs add a unique focus tree for certain countries, then we have DLCs that fundamentally change certain elements of the game. Bottom line, there are many DLCs that do many things for a variety of prices. Do not purchase any DLCs until you've played the base game and you know you enjoy it. There's plenty of content in the base game. Then take a look at the DLCs on offer and add a handful at a time, as there is no reason to add them all at once. Paradox do offer a monthly subscription service which opens up all of the expansions to you for $5 per month, or £4 or €5. This may be right for some of you if you definitely enjoy the base game and ultimately comes down to personal circumstance. Alternatively, you could go with Xbox Game Pass, but you have to pay for the DLCs separately, and they're not on sale nearly as much as they are on Steam, so you do need to consider that. There is a very healthy mod scene for Hearts of Iron 4, and when I say very healthy, I mean a ridiculous number of lovingly crafted mods, from minor changes to large overhauls. There's just a ludicrous amount for you to get lost in. Between Paradox releasing the occasional free update, large paid-for DLCs, and a healthy mod scene, you're never going to be short of content if you do fall in love with Hearts of Iron 4. So let's bring this all together and answer the question, is Hearts of Iron 4 worth it for you today? The game is a legend, both for being the deepest World War II strategy experience available and its ability to make you feel stupid. Nothing comes close to the scale and depth that Hearts of Iron 4 successfully delivers. It's matured over the years. The silly, annoying bugs or inconsistencies are mostly ironed out, though not completely. Once you start to grasp the game, it's fun to follow some of the alternative history paths for the major and some of the not-so-major nations. If you enjoy deep strategy games, don't mind a steep learning curve, and have a thing for World War II, Hearts of Iron 4 could not be more perfect for you. If you enjoy the history of that time and historic accuracy, but don't like a big learning curve, there are some great guides out there to help you get over the initial learning curve. If you enjoy military hardware, there's a lot for you to like here, with famous tanks, planes, and individual ships for you to construct and fight with. You'll want to set aside a good couple of hours each time you play the game to really get into it, so bear that in mind when making your decision. If you are a potential Hearts of Iron 4 player, please feel free to ask me questions in the comments, and if you found this video useful, I have plenty of others like it, so please consider checking those out too. If you are a veteran of the game, thanks for watching, and please share your thoughts in the comments below. They're always welcome. Just go easy on me, as this is the hardest video I have ever had to make. I'm going to lie down now. See ya.